Hello there, and welcome to Thank the Maker, a podcast about heroes, princesses, scoundrels, hokey religions, ancient weapons, and all things Star Wars. I'm Adam Russell.
I am Jason Chiodo.
And it is Mike Forrester dawning on us. Get to podcasting at the end of June, whenever this comes out. It is crazy to me that not that long ago, we were all hanging out watching The Mandalorian and Grogu together. It seems like it wasn't even a month. It was a couple weeks ago, and I'm sitting here watching our patrons pile in as we're recording and talking about new topics, and it feels like there has been so much life that has been lived since we last talked about the last Star Wars movie to come out. And as we look to the horizon of all these fun things coming out now, as we're kind of figuring out what is the next thing in Star Wars, we have kind of a fun topic to talk about tonight because it has also been a blockbuster year for movies.
It feels good, man. It feels like we haven't had a summer like this in a long, long time in terms of anticipation for things and films that people are actually getting excited about. We're going to talk, obviously, about Disclosure Day and Spielberg and the long history of Lucas and Spielberg today, but I'm hearing great things about Masters of the Universe. I'm hearing great things about Supergirl.
I'm going to go see that this week.
Oh, yeah.
We've got, Jason over in your camp. We've got the Odyssey trailer for Spider-Man dropped last week. When you look at the list, Toy Story, my kid just went and saw Toy Story last week.
It's going to be an absolutely record-breaking summer for animated films between Toy Story 5 and Minions and Monsters.
There you go. And also just the variety of movies out this year, which I think is great because you've got the epic, you've got the Project Hail Mary, which, I'm almost done reading the book.
Oh, nice.
Another cool part of has Dungeon Crawler Carl broken through your...
what is that? I keep seeing it come through. I have no idea. Is it because I'm 47? Is that what's happening?
No, I think what happened is the guy got a new agent, signed a new book deal. It's a new kind of like, multi-book series about a guy that basically, it's almost like I would say between Running Man and Hunger Games, if I could describe it.
Jogging guy.
Jogging.
I believe it's a soft J. Yeah.
But it's basically like the opening of the world is a guy wakes up one day and nearly everything that is above ground suddenly gets pulled into the core of the earth. Come to find out that the planet was actually property of a mining company. Mm-hmm. Planet Earth is property of a mining company and they need resources. And they basically are like, we're going to strip all the resources off Earth, but we're going to let some of the inhabitants prove their worth by being able to go through essentially a Squid Games-like ability to prove themselves as valuable inhabitants.
All right.
And a wacky story from there. But the reason I'm talking about this is because they already announced that it's going to be a show on Peacock.
So were they mining deep substrate foliated calcite, or was it a different?
Very close. It was actually spider silk. So the interesting part about this is that like it is a great time to be among media. Like it feels like people are consuming in the age of course, we've talked a lot about AI and AI slop and all these things where like that is a big worry for a lot of people. We just had Gio on talking through Armor Party about, all these productions moving to different parts of the world because they're cheaper and all this, kind of trying to subsidize bank accounts and all these things for these giant corporations. But it is a really good time to be consuming media right now because there's a lot of really cool stuff. And that feels exciting. The blockbusters are there, but there's a lot of really cool movements happening within media that I think, frankly, is really exciting.
Yeah, especially if you're nerds like us, if you're into the genre corner of motion pictures, big horror stuff happening this summer, sci-fi, of course, adventure, and then mining that nostalgia with stuff like Masters of the Universe, and we have another giant Marvel movie coming at the end of the year too. So
it's
lots of stuff to keep you occupied and get you out into the theaters, which is like you said, Adam, super fun.
Well, I had an incredible time seeing Disclosure Day. My wife and I went. She was super excited about it. Surprisingly, not a super huge sci-fi fan, but just a fan of fun, good movies like anyone. And she loved it. I loved it. All of us being kids born in the late 70s, early 80s. Spielberg has just been a part of our lives since we stepped into this world. And to have him return to sci-fi with such a big epic type film like this made it one of our most anticipated films. And I know my experience was essentially everything I could have hoped for. with this film. It's been a couple weeks since it dropped. I saw it last week, I think, and I'm ready to see it again. How was it for you guys? Jason, you should also tell the listeners and the viewers that you mixed all of the trailers for this film.
Yeah, not all of them, but yeah, it had a hand in the big 90-second Super Bowl bow that we had right before the kickoff, one of the theatricals, and then nearly everything that you would have seen on television or socials, everything else there, especially towards the beginning of the campaign. I was mixing all of those things. So the interesting thing is that Amblin was keeping, thankfully, a lot of the story very siloed from folks that were working on it. And there was a lot of reverence for the project, a lot of importance on keeping this story under wraps. So I was as blind as anybody else who was just, consuming regular media on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. And I was super excited about it. Everybody here at the studio, I mean, there was a real palpable sense of, and anybody who ends up working at a major studio obviously is a film buff in some way. You love film. And who isn't a film buff that doesn't love Steven Spielberg?
Yeah.
And so and I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it really gave you a lot of those really classic Spielbergian nuggets that he loves to throw in there. The crosstalk, the beautiful camera movement, just a warmth and story. A lot of classic Spielberg elements wrapped up in a great little sci-fi bow. I thought it was fun. It was a really cool film.
Mike, what was your Disclosure Day experience?
Well, I texted all you guys and said, go see it. I'm like, it's a deeply, like, I'm shook in a moving way. And, that it was a stressful week when it came out. Jason and I have been geeking out over, dude, I'm excited about this. Like, what have you heard? And any of this. And obviously Jason is a pro to be like, what I know, I won't tell you out of respect for the film. And what I also don't know is because I literally don't know, which is, the side of the business that's how it goes. But, I had a long week and, I was overly tired. And my body gets worse as it ages, I have a hard time regulating, I get more emotional. I get more, irritated, or I get more open to your sense of self. And I remember walking out of the movie and just sitting in my car and just writing some notes and just like a lot of I want to say happy tears, but just like a lot of tears of like almost being overwhelmed from how the last act of the movie was so human in the sense of, I guess we're also saying spoilers for people who haven't seen it yet.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Let's say that. But it was such a more emotional human story than I think I was anticipating. And I think part of that is I can understand why some people had mixed feelings about it, because it doesn't have the immediate spectacle of the Normandy D-Day landing. It doesn't have the spectacle of a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex, or a spaceship coming out of the woods and taking this, character that you've loved, or say world-ending tripods landing on the dock and the ferry and blasting people, or just the sense of adventure of any of the Indiana Jones movies. So I can understand how when people were expecting the confusion of going, was Disclosure Day, the moment of disclosure, was that the beginning of the movie or was that the end of the movie? And I think that might have thrown some people of thinking, I'm interested in seeing Spielberg's take on how the world would react, but it kind of flipped the script a little bit by saying we're leading up to that moment. And, it actually isn't just his commentary on it. It's more of kind of exposing, like, there's a lot of stuff that's already out there. It's up to us to have our own feelings about how we would react.
Yeah, I had an absolutely emotional experience as well. And my biggest takeaway, we're going to get to how this relates directly to Star Wars, what Spielberg would do with Star Wars momentarily. But for now, I will say that all of the feelings that I want to have in a sci-fi story that connects and lands on a personal level, I had in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it all worked despite a few things that are so off-putting to me. Like, I'm a very scientifically minded person. I have spent the better part of 20 years training my brain to think critically, to be a skeptic, to be a scientific skeptic in that critical thinking sense, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, skeptic with a capital S. And conspiracy theories, cryptozoology, UFOs, all that stuff, I've moved past that crap. As much as I want it all to be real, there's a fucking weather balloon in Area 51. Crop circles are a bunch of guys with ropes and pieces of wood. Every UFO video is a fucking blob squatch. It's a fucking bug. It's a bunch of shit. There's nothing. We're not getting anything. We have billions of phones. We're getting nothing. That doesn't make me want it any less. And the fact that Spielberg brought so much of that shit into this film, I mean, just the crop circle moment alone, and then the Area 51 shit at the end. This dude is such a master of storytelling and such a personal, emotional filmmaker that shit just dinged right off the top, went right by, didn't even fucking matter. Like, I don't know if I could have cared less, which is so bizarre because, like, in almost any other filmmaker's hands, things like that, they really get to me. And there's certain kind of hokey, like, just right down the barrel of the lens moments that most filmmakers can't pull off that Steven Spielberg can. And whether it's like, wheeling up an old gangly alien on like a Silence of the Lambs gurney and opening a weird plexiglass hatch right in front of our faces, or it's E.T. being obviously a puppet, or Jaws being, like all of the things that most people can't pull off, he just does it. He's such an expert. And this analogy popped in my head. It was this rare moment where like I was having like, there was like a meta commentary going in my head as I was watching the movie, but it wasn't taking me out at all. Like I was having this like out of body creative brain experience where it's like, he's like Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix or Dimebag Darrell or somebody, like a guitar player that can absolutely rip and just is just like the most insane guitar player that can put the most complex shit in a song. And never do you go, oh, this guy's really showing off, or this guy really thinks he's a shit, but if he could only write a song, And then you see some douchebag in a Guitar Center ripping, and it's like, yeah, well, but can you write a song?
Sure.
Or any of the flashy things that are cheesy in the wrong hands.
You're describing Dragon Force, I think.
Yeah. Like,
or you know what? A flip side of that same metaphor, if you want to talk about somebody like Eddie Van Halen, I mean, his rhythm work was impeccable.
Right.
It's not the flashy stuff. I mean, he's known for the flashy stuff, but just an absolutely supernaturally talented technical master of all parts of it, including what is usually considered mundane.
So the songwriting and the storytelling are the aspect that it's almost, I mean, anything can be taught, but it seems like these types of human beings just came into the world equipped with these superpowers, that it's hard to understand how they can do all of it and pull it off. And whether it's blocking in camera moves or really like sometimes like borderline cheesy like camera gimmicks and like little what was the moment? There was a moment that reminded me of like the anthill or whatever turning into the mountain logo at the beginning of Indiana Jones. It was that same kind of like match move kind of thing. Anyway, he can do things like this, and it's not cheesy. It just works because there's an indescribable kind of like intangibility to what this dude does as a storyteller. And I'm having so much trouble articulating it for obvious reasons because it is so magical.
There's a certain part of where Spielberg does those transitions and makes you feel like you are seeing it from a perspective of what he does. And that is a hand-in-hand partnership with his, director of cinematography. But he has been doing that since the beginning. And for a guy who is 80 years old,
yes,
this is really the thing to go. Again, like I can understand why people were expecting spectacle in the sense of going, okay, well, is it going to be another movie like the overwhelming end of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull or any of these other like crazy set pieces, that the movie actually was getting smaller and smaller and smaller as the movie was going on, which is interesting from how he usually does things. But I think in the moment of kind of explaining the story of as he's aging and is also getting to a point in his life where he's looking back on saying, when I started making movies, think of how the world has changed and our ability to be able to make anything that I can now dream of. I actually don't have to be that curious about how we would make it. And so the brilliance of this movie is almost saying, in a world where we can imagine and create nearly anything, the empathy of communication is still one of the most confusing and daunting tasks of our humanity.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really, really deep message for some people that makes them incredibly uncomfortable. And I think that actually plays to why people were almost like scared to realize at the beginning of talking about all these different things, we're on the brink of World War III in the movie, which was very understated, actually. And I think all of a sudden, then you see you're at the gas station and people are looting, you're grabbing the water, and they're like, you hear in the background, this is the closest we've ever got since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think he was right to not lean into that, in the sense of we would have started asking questions about how did we get there? And he's like, no. We are actually, almost since humanity, since his last big spectacle of a World War II movie, we have almost always been on the brink of complete annihilation.
Yeah.
And we still are having trouble communicating. We're still having trouble recognizing our humanity in anyone else that exists as a human on this planet. So I can understand why people were uncomfortable with that, because it is incredibly disappointing to see how little we have progressed as humans, despite these technological advances where we have been able to make on a screen nearly anything we want to see.
We can imagine anything, but we can't imagine how to solve all of these problems that we've created for ourselves.
That's exactly it.
If you have more thoughts, Jason, go ahead, and then we'll...
Yeah, sure. First, I want to read this comment from patron SoCalBat Ethan. He says, there are definitely some on-the-nose moments in dialogue that could easily feel hokey, and I found tolerance for how those landed, and those depend entirely on how much you appreciate how Spielberg does it. His visual storytelling and Williams' score, of course, Williams, we didn't even mention him yet, carry it beautifully for me, but he could see how younger audiences could also not buy into it if they weren't raised on it. And this brings up the specter of a common criticism that I've read about this film, that has to do with the so-called sort of boomer perspective from Steven Spielberg, right? Sort of simplifying things. I mean, there's like the idea of having to get to a television station to be able to get the word out on something like that feels a little bit antiquated. There's the idea that, people are worried that their faith may conflict with the idea of intelligent life, right? And it's almost like a little bit of an antiquated way to look at things. And I was thinking on this earlier today, whenever we decided that we were going to speak about Spielberg and his relationship with Star Wars, where I was thinking that much in the same way that the beings, the aliens in this film, communicate to the children through animals to make the message a little more palatable, Spielberg is kind of putting forth a really complicated discussion about empathy and about communication, like you were talking about, Mike, but in sort of this maybe more simplified, warm presentation that Steven is known for. So that could be perceived as, maybe an antiquated view, but maybe it's just like a Trojan horse to bring in a more easily digestible message for a more complex discussion topic.
Not unlike the way Star Wars has approached a lot of complex themes in the past. Going back to the beginning, it's a very black and white, good versus evil kind of thing. We've explored much more complex things, but the idea of empathy being a superpower and being central to evolution, and like a successful evolutionary path for a species is very much the sort of the light side of the Force approach. The dark side is faster, easier, more powerful in that sense, but it leads to a dark end.
There is an interesting discussion about, Emily Blunt's character. The thing that almost like stops people in their tracks when they interact with her, of course, is not just the fact that she's suddenly speaking Russian or another language, but her message. When you think about it, almost all humans want security, comfort, and to be seen or recognized or almost like be acknowledged for their existence. That was her superpower, quote unquote, in this movie, was literally just to like speak to people's fears, reassure them and say, it's going to be okay. Go do this. Right. And of course, then it kind of gets convoluted of like someone wants to go and pray to her and all this stuff, which is very like, if you look back in history, what separated us from the animal kingdom was our ability to believe in myths and fables and trust in someone to say, if I give you this, you'll get this, even though there's no tangible relationship other than just a strict belief system. Yeah. And so of course, a little ham-fisted in some ways and other ways we look at it. But I think when we look at that, those are very simplistic things. And when we start talking about the idea of intelligent life or things that exist beyond our planet and our framework that we've existed in, this is where it starts to introduce, pun intended, the gray of where Andor also got us into the gray for Star Wars, because morality then became a thing where it becomes, well, if we do this and we do this, it doesn't necessarily make us good. It doesn't necessarily make us evil. And I think a lot of Star Wars since Rogue One has really expanded on this idea of where the gray exists on the very obvious good, the very obvious bad. Maul, Cassian Andor, Luthen Rael, all of these characters that have really resonated with people. This is all part of the same discussion of going, things are not as black and white as we've wanted to make them seem. And that is actually black and white thinking is what got us into, in the movie, World War III on the eve, because someone thinks they're right, someone thinks they're wrong. The only option is annihilation.
Yeah. Well, before we get any further in this discussion about how this relates to Star Wars and so on, let's back up and talk about the long-rumored possibility of Spielberg directing Star Wars. This goes back to the mid-'80s at least. Well, the references go all the way back to 77. There have been rumors about George offering Spielberg the director's chair, starting with I guess it would be Return of the Jedi was the first, rumored offer. But in 1977, there was a Rolling Stone interview where George talked about other directors coming in and directing Star Wars. And I'll quote him here. He said, they asked, it wouldn't bother you to have someone else do the ones in between? And he said, no, it would be interesting. I would want to try to get some good directors and see what their interpretation of the theme is. I think it would be interesting. It's like taking a theme in film school, say, okay, everybody do their interpretation of this theme. It's an interesting idea to see how people interpret the genre. It's a fun genre to play with. All the prototype stuff is done now. Nobody has to worry about what a Wookiee is and what it does or how it reacts. Wookiees are there, the people are there, the environment's there, the empire's there, everything is there. And now people will start building on it. I've put up the concrete slab and the walls, and now everybody can have fun drawing the pictures and putting on the little gargoyles and doing all the really fun stuff. And it's a competition. I'm hoping if I get friends of mine, there we go, reference, they'll want to do a much better film. Like, I'll show George what I can do, that I can do a film twice that good, and then they can. But I want to do the last one so I can do one twice as good as everybody else. So obviously he was telling the truth about having other people direct. He went on to hire Irvin Kershner and Richard Marquand to direct The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But there was also this rumor, like I said, that George wanted Spielberg to direct Return of the Jedi. And the rumor was that since George had left the Directors Guild in 1980 over the credit requirements, you're supposed to credit the director at the top of the film and some other things. He left the guild, and since Spielberg was still a member and very involved there, that plan was squashed, supposedly. There is no direct quote that can be found out. Maybe it's out there. I couldn't find it. It's hard to find. Spielberg himself actually fully outright denied very recently that the offer had ever been made. He said, quote, "I was never offered Return of the Jedi, ever." So the question is, was this sort of hearsay in George wanting to do it, but he never officially made the offer? So in that sense, Spielberg is telling the absolute truth here, that he was never offered it. because there is a 2002 interview with Empire magazine where Spielberg claimed, quote, "I've asked him. He won't let me do one. I wanted to do one 15 years ago." So that's mid-'80s, I guess. And he didn't want me to do it. I understand why. Star Wars is George's baby. George is my best friend, and I believe I'm his, but we're all competitive. I don't know what to believe. And all, deep into the internet age, there's an archive of everything you would think, but there's still a lot of stuff that's really actually hard to find the archival issues of, from the print days and things like that. The thing that is really most intriguing to me is this 2015 interview with Josh Horowitz on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast.
Great podcast, by the way.
He had Ron Howard on. Ron Howard was talking about the prequels. And this is the one I think that we're all thinking of. We talked about it in the early days of the podcast when we covered these films. Ron Howard said, George didn't necessarily want to direct them. He told me he'd talked to Robert Zemeckis, Steven Spielberg, and me. I was the third one he spoke to. They all said the same thing. George, you should do it. I don't think anybody wanted to follow up that act at the time. It was an honor, but it would have been too daunting. So the specific claim that this is either turned into or there was more context here was that he was talking specifically about The Phantom Menace. And we've referenced this a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a direct quote. This is this is secondhand, I guess. This is George claiming to Ron Howard that he asked someone else. So, we know how it is with George. Like a lot of things, the truth is in there somewhere. There's some version of it. There's all this urban legend in his own revisionist history. And he even talks about revisionist history being a tactic. I think he told this to J.J. Abrams.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it all that much harder to figure out. That said, there's enough here that we can all assume that there were conversations. There were no official offers, perhaps, but these guys are best friends, right? There's no way they weren't sitting around, having whatever Spielberg drinks when other people are drinking alcohol, talking about what ifs. There's no way that there wasn't some kind of discussion, I guess, right? But
Georgie's in his Nike Monarchs drinking Diet Cokes with those guys for sure.
Right.
You know what? If there are any two films of the original 6 that would have made the most sense, it's definitely Jedi or The Phantom Menace, I feel like, right? There's a certain amount of whimsy in Return of the Jedi. I've spoken about it before. I know that this is also Nick's favorite. It's my favorite film. I don't think that it's the best one, but it's my favorite one. There's a lot of whimsy in that film from the early 80s that really speaks to the sort of sensibility that Steven Spielberg brought to the fore during that time period. And then with The Phantom Menace, the film being so centered around Anakin and Steven's propensity to be able to get these amazing performances out of young actors,
mm-hmm.
I think that would have been really interesting to see as well. So I don't know. Curious to see what you think, Mike.
I think the other interesting part of the conversation goes back to actually part of the business of it all. There is a famous bet that George Lucas told Steven Spielberg when Close Encounters was coming out, that George Lucas said, I will bet you some of the profit sharing.
I think they did 1% of each other's films.
Of each other's films if it is a bigger film. Because George Lucas believed Close Encounters was going to be a bigger film than Star Wars. It was not. And so Steven Spielberg loses the bet. George gets 1% or whatever it is. Now, the other person that was kind of involved in this that makes the Spielberg Lucas connection interesting was Francis Ford Coppola, because he's also part of their cohort of, at the film program. And George Lucas was the one that was actually developing Apocalypse Now as a screenplay. The company was hired by Coppola's production company. And then George had this idea that he was going to direct it as a literal version of what he wanted to kind of base in his Buck Rogers version of the Vietnam War. He was like, I was assuming that I would do Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola does it, knocks it out of the park, makes this film that George Lucas is like, I could have never made this, and this is incredible. But the tone of it is a complete spectacle, but also so unlike Steven Spielberg.
Right.
In every sense of the way. And then when you have when you have this idea of like, then we have The Godfather as part of the conversation. And these are just movies that like Spielberg wouldn't have done. He wasn't leaning that way. And George always kind of felt like he was torn in between wanting to develop adventure. And this is where, Indiana Jones comes into the conversation and all of that. So I think in regards to Star Wars, knowing what the movies were that were coming out that were really putting all these guys in almost walking up the steps of Hall of Fame already that early in their careers, which is insane to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that Jedi would have been the easy one, but I think it had to be Phantom Menace in that sense of what Steven had done, what he was experimenting with, the technology. I think he was intimidated by in some sense because the Phantom Menace was, I still think, kind of pandered for its human performances. In that sense, you had great human performances from certain actors, but Jake Lloyd was an inexperienced actor, and a lot of those kind of and then of course the Jar Jar Binks, where Ahmed Best is doing exactly as he's told, but it's a goofiness that I think Spielberg would have approached the performances different, and also some of the ham-fisted dialogue that we've come to appreciate over time in George's way of writing things. But Steven is much more of a show, not tell. And I think George was trying to figure out how to get us into the politics of how important that story was for Star Wars. And I just don't know if Spielberg would have done it the same way.
Spielberg also much more of an actor's director, really
100%.
known for a lot of collaboration with his actors, and also anyone that I've ever spoken to that's worked on a set that Steven has been running, he's very good at delegating authority. He goes in, he assembles a team of people that he knows are very competent, and he can go in and instead of micromanaging everything, say, the shot doesn't look right. I'm gonna go grab lunch for a couple hours. I'll come back and you guys will have everything right. You know what I mean? He trusts people. And I feel like, especially in the prequel era, and this is not to say that one thing would have been better than other, but just to create a little bit of distinction between the two filmmakers. I know that George was very much involved in every single aspect of everything. They were very much George's films. So maybe it would have been a little more collaborative with Steven as well. It's interesting to think about.
We all know, most of us who are this deep in it know that although Richard Marquand directed Return of the Jedi, on paper, that Lucas was over his shoulder the entire time. Reportedly, I mean, he was so heavy-handed as a producer that he essentially took over directing in a lot of cases. So I can imagine a collaboration between Spielberg and Lucas. You look at Indiana Jones and all the other successes, would have worked out great with exactly like the kind of dynamic you're talking about, trusting who else is involved. But before I say anything about the Phantom Menace, I think of all of the Star Wars films to date, all of the Star Wars everything to date, I think Return of the Jedi is the most Spielbergian Star Wars film,
for sure,
like on all levels. And I wonder how much Lucas was trying to kind of capture that style. I mean, at that point, let's see, what had been out?
I mean, Raiders is 1981.
Yep.
E.T. and Poltergeist are in 1982.
Yeah.
You have two movies very focused on children, young actors. And then Temple of Doom comes out a year after in 1984.
In terms of what Spielberg had done that Lucas would have been influenced by, I mean, there wasn't anything like that yet, but it still just has that, I don't know. It has that feeling to it, and
well, the Ewok village is so Spielberg in some senses of like the moments of the actors being, hey, we did it, and then cutting back to the very human moment of Luke, which obviously is almost kind of like a meme at this point. Here's Wicket playing the drums on the Stormtrooper helmets, and Luke's over here being like, my dad's dead. Thanks everyone for caring. So like in that sense, I think those he would have handled those differently. But when you look at certain other films around, let's say, Phantom Menace, 1999, he's coming off Lost World and Amistad in the same year. This is 1997. 1998 is Saving Private Ryan. So this is
he's in the thick of it.
He's in the thick of it. There is no chance that and for Saving Private Ryan being enhanced by technology, but still very grounded in, the duck boats. He wants to get all the filming. He wants to put pyrotechnics on the beach. He wants to do the set pieces. All of this stuff was so different than where George was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But you could almost argue that Spielberg gets inspired by George's utmost dedication to pushing the technology, that in 2001, then we have a movie called AI, Artificial Intelligence. And then in 2002, another tech-heavy movie of Minority Report.
Mm-hmm. Both ILM films.
Yes.
Some really groundbreaking stuff in AI. Ethan in the Discord chat, in the patron chat, said Spielberg preferred to shoot on film, especially back in the late 90s. He wasn't ready to film and edit digitally. The Phantom Menace was shot on film, though. It was edited digitally.
Episode 2 was the first one, full digital, yeah.
Yeah, with those Sony cameras that were in development but weren't ready until, 2001 or whenever they started shooting.
And interesting, here we are 27 years down the line from the beginning of the prequels. And in the summer of 2026, the thing that we're talking about the most is that the Odyssey is going to be in 70 millimeter IMAX, all shot on film. And, Steven Spielberg went back and shot on Panavision 35 millimeter, which is one of those other little intangible things I think that gave Disclosure Day that feeling.
Agree.
It's like something that's not immediately perceptible, but it's like, oh, this is putting me right back in that warm mid 80s time whenever Spielberg could do no wrong at all. So
right. Yeah.
I'm with that. Interesting.
When I think about The Phantom Menace, the first thing I thought of was exactly what you said, Jason. Spielberg's superhuman ability to communicate with kids, and not saying that he directs these children like child actors is, I guess, what you call that on paper, but he just has a way of speaking and connecting with kids and like playing make-believe and engaging with them in a way that feels so real on film, because he knows how to make them act without performing like they're you look at the behind the scenes stuff from E.T., for example. That's the earliest best example. I mean, it's like a dad with kids, playing with figures in the sandbox, Yes, he's asking these kids to, cry harder or like, oh, here's a scary thing, but he's really like engaging with these little humans in a way that I think is like almost impossible to teach. He just has that thing. And you look at, like you said, Mike, an inexperienced actor with Jake Lloyd. I think you could have taken the same script and the same actors, and Steven Spielberg would have created something magical. It's not that The Phantom Menace isn't special to a lot of people. It just, we know the power of Spielberg with these kind of stories of kids exploring fantastical things. We know the kind of director he is. We know the kind of director George is. And the Jar Jar Binks reference, that conversation is really interesting too, because look at E.T. That is a goofy looking alien. That is a bizarre looking little puppet. What is the shape of that alien? Like what? It's so weird. He has this uncanny ability to make the bizarre relatable.
Probably in the eyes, obviously. Like
yeah.
E.T.'s whole thing is his eyes in that sense. Everything else is somewhat humanoid in its anatomy, but like it's E.T.'s eyes are just like bright blue. They're bright blue human eyes, But you still have to capture that in a convincing way. Something that's emotionally convincing, even if it's not intellectually convincing. You know what I mean? Oh, without a doubt.
So, who knows what the direction would have been with Jar Jar's voice, accent, his movement, what Spielberg's interpretation would have been. But even if it was equally as goofy, I think all of it would have connected better, because things that didn't land, I think all come down to George isn't a director of people. He knows this. He's not a great director of human beings. Like the original trilogy worked so well because they had so much chemistry on set. There were so many other people involved that aren't widely known as having been contributors. There's so many other factors in play. And with it all being on George's shoulders, and going back to Ron Howard's quote about how everyone was like, no, man, this is all you. You do it. It was so daunting for everyone. When it's just him, I'm going to flip this. George has been at his best when he's been collaborating.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It seems like a hot
So when
take.
he's not,
I'm with you on that. You know, I mean, when you think about it from that standpoint, we're talking about the focus, obviously, of you know, the younger actors that Spielberg is known for. And this is also, you see those moments of Jurassic Park, right? Like you see the, you know, the iconic, the Jello and the kitchen and all of these amazing moments, and even just smaller moments like in Saving Private Ryan, just, you know, the kids and the towns that the soldiers go into. But when you think about like War of the Worlds, for instance, that's Justin Chatwin, who is an up and coming actor at that time, and that's a really dark film about a dad trying to keep his family together, especially in the scene where he has to go, you know, kill Tim Robbins because he realizes this dude's like losing his mind. But you think about that from that standpoint, you know, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., Elliot's older brother. What would he have done with Anakin? What would he have done with Hayden Christensen? Yeah. What would he have done with Natalie Portman? Because Natalie Portman's frankly incredible, but she's also been an actor for as long as, you know, she's one of the oldest actors in Hollywood at this point.
Yeah. And she, just to respond really quickly to her, I think she's a great actor, but I think there is a bigger gap between her, what she can pull off just mostly on her own with someone like George, and with a great director of actors.
Yeah.
Some directors, some actors like Robert Downey Jr. can be directed by, I don't know, pick an Amazon driver off the street and tell him to direct Robert Downey Jr. and he's going to kill it. Right. Not all actors can do that.
Right.
So
the performance of between, you know, her performance in the prequels compared to not that much further after, between V for Vendetta, Black Swan, you're like,
Closer,
you're like, yo, this person is on it at this point.
Yeah.
But you know, Hayden Christensen, I think for as many times as the delivery of these clunky lines get memeified at this point, it would have been very interesting to see a Spielberg take on those two actors specifically, when, you know, Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor are already well established as being actors.
Yeah.
And then just you know, as more, I don't know, as younger actors get directed by someone, it kind of actually changes their trajectory. It kind of seems like Natalie Portman was going that way, but Hayden Christensen for a long time kind of struggled after that to find his next role. What was his thing going to be? And that could have been, you know, from his, was that working with George Lucas, in some sense, a kiss of death for saying, you know, George took all this on himself. What would the pedigree have been like to work with Spielberg?
Yeah. I think about the way that Filoni describes the intent of the story of the Duel of the Fates, Qui-Gon being the father figure that Anakin could have had, and Obi-Wan being the brother figure that he was left with. You know, Spielberg would have identified that connection. And I imagine even if it was one scene, deepening that connection between Anakin and Qui-Gon, that could have rippled throughout the rest of the prequels in a way that would have really articulated what Filoni talked about on screen in a way that I don't think any of us really understood. Until we saw that.
Took us 20 years to find out that the Duel of the Fates was actually dueling for the fate of Anakin.
Yeah.
How interesting. And maybe it would have been a little more in the forefront with Spielberg.
Well, and the other conversation too is that, again, we talked about Spielberg's appreciation of being a director, but also working hand in hand with his director of cinematography. If we look at our focus kind of on the prequels, it is very hard to shoot emerging technology. We actually saw the struggle of going, certain parts of the volume worked really well. And when when a DP doesn't know how to utilize this technology or hasn't had enough time to play, say during COVID, Disney's like, crank out all the shows. you could kind of see where the limitations were with someone who didn't have as much to work on it. So then you get into this nearly all green screen combined with the miniatures, all of this stuff that George is really pushing for. That was an intimidating ask. The DP for the prequels, David Tattersall, was largely known for shooting Young Adventures of Indiana Jones, a lot of TV stuff, and ended up doing a lot of the cinematography. I don't know if he did. I'm not sure if he ended up doing. I know he did episode 1 and episode 2. But when you think about how Spielberg directs the visuals, how would the Duel of the Fates look different with Spielberg saying, no, the shot doesn't make sense. We're not doing this, because there's definitely times where you look at beautiful stills within the prequels. But is it because of the spectacle of it, or is it because of the blocking? Is it because of, would we have seen the Duel of the Fates through different eyes if it was shot differently, to the point where we had to explain the Duel of the Fates? But could we have seen the Duel of the Fates outside of just this amazing lightsaber choreography?
Yeah.
A thought.
But going, to Revenge of the Sith, rumor has it again that Spielberg helped Lucas quite a bit with the final battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin. So maybe we already know what an epic lightsaber battle looks like with Spielberg, at least camera adjacent. And
potentially we'll see it on Starfighter, and also Tom Cruise's take on it.
Come on, let's get it. Look, I'm trying to find the DP on Revenge of the Sith. David Tattersall.
Okay.
Is that what you said? Same dude?
Yeah. So continuity through the entire trilogy. Interesting.
Spielberg just, man, yes, a DP goes so far. You look at
anything with Roger Deakins.
Yes.
Right.
There are probably 3 DPs out there in the world that anyone who's not super into cinematography could name. Roger Deakins is one of them. And you see how much difference there is from film to film, because directors vary wildly on how involved they are in the cinematography. Some directors are just very much actor types. Some are technicians in sort of zoomed out ways, or specific little different ways. There's a spectrum is what I'm saying. But a DP can make a big difference. That said, yes, we see quite a bit of variance over Spielberg's career, but there's something about composition, framing, and blocking, and the way the camera moves that is unmistakably Spielberg, regardless of which DP he has. The overall look can change, the vibes, the tone can change from DP to DP, but just go to YouTube and search Steven Spielberg blocking, and you'll almost definitely get the conversation from the beginning of Jaws, when they get on the ferry and it's moving across, and it's this 5-minute wonder, and it changes framing. The camera moves a dozen times, and you get a dozen shots out of one shot.
Right.
The way this dude can move the camera. And sometimes it's you see that in movies, you see it in Michael Bay movies, and it's so distracting. But Spielberg does it.
Yeah.
And it's fucking magic, dude. We see it as people who pay attention to this shit, but it's the perfect example of something special being invisible, whether it's audio or visual. Williams does this with his music. It's a theme is front and center, but it doesn't distract you. Things in a mix. Jason, something has to be audible to be present in the way that it's intended to be, but in just a way that it's not distracting. And that's a mix thing, that's an EQ thing, that's compression. It's all these different tools, right? And Spielberg's using all these visual tricks to pull this off. And there's one in Disclosure Day where it goes into the car, swings around, comes back, and then sees the side view mirror in a way that makes me think they had to build a rig for this. There's probably not a frame on this car to get it there.
Yeah.
But it happens so fast and so seamlessly and so perfectly operated.
Yeah, and those beautiful camera moves from Spielberg. I mean, they kind of proceed. I mean, Janusz Kaminski's been his ride or die DP since Schindler's List, I would assume.
Yeah,
But Spielberg was choreographing these very Spielbergian camera moves prior to working with him. So that's all out of his mind. The wonder between De Palma and Spielberg. I mean, they're the kings of wonders as far as I'm concerned. But there was a great wonder in the beginning of Disclosure Day. I'm sure the one that everybody knows about whenever Emily Blunt's character shows up at the television studio, kind of goes through
ready. Yeah.
getting ready, and then it ends with the clicking performance. And she had to. I mean, she pulled all of that off in a wonder,
Right.
which is insane. I mean, just crazy. And there's
I
always,
want to know how many takes.
yeah, who knows? And there's always so many different speaking roles in these wonders that Spielberg shows up. There was another camera movement scene that I thought was very notable for me, at least. Josh O'Connor's character was separated from the safe house that they were put in. This is right around the time that the crop circle showed up, and then the search party from Ward X is coming after him.
Yes.
And he's ducking behind a fence. It's a little bit comical how it's blocked, because it's like, how are they not seeing him? But regardless, because there's this beautiful camera move that occurs where the camera sort of swoops between him and the fence, and it goes from one side to the other, and it's wonderful. But then I got to thinking about it, and it's like, you know what? This is a shot that can kind of only happen now, because that was probably a drone shot.
Right.
Because it was so tight, it moved so smoothly that they probably got that with a drone.
And went up and over, and then when it comes around, when he gets in the car, you see where he just came from. So there's no, there's no Russian arm, or there's no, boom or anything like that. Yeah, that's a great call.
Yeah, and no equipment in the shot, like you said, and still very concise, cohesive, very logical. You're never crossing over, you're never breaking the 180-degree roll, or if you do, you're doing it with a way that is always keeping you in space. He's just a master of those sorts of things. Exactly. Yeah. Just a delightful little sequence.
What I would guess, if they did that with a drone, I've seen this quite a bit, following things on social media, whatever, where either it's a rig that's set up to connect to a drone or be disconnected from a drone. It's got a handheld gimbal on it, or they're literally holding the drone and operating that. You've got someone remotely pulling focus and operating the motorized gimbal part of it, and that would make a lot of sense for that. A friend, my friend's husband, was in 24-hour film festival. You know about this?
Yeah,
going on forever. He did one probably 15 years ago. They did with one of the first really good looking drones, and they did exactly that. Like, they flew it in, went through a barn, did this whole thing, and shot the whole thing on that. But they were walking around. He's got behind the scenes photos of holding this drone. Yeah, it's good. So we're down the rabbit hole in some stuff that most people are rolling their eyes about. But
thank the maker, baby.
He's just a master, and I hope that he lives to be 120, because this can't be the dude's last film.
Hey, let's get him on one of these Kinberg films, huh?
Yeah.
Man, now we're talking.
Yeah,
now we're talking.
I wonder if George's feelings about the way Star Wars has been handled, or the way the deal was handled with Disney, the way, the famous quote about the white slavers and all this, feeling like he was betrayed. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that has completely ruled out Spielberg, just on a friend level, on a don't hook up with my ex-wife kind of level.
Yeah.
Or maybe he has George's blessing. Maybe he's the only one who's close to him that he would say, okay, man, I'll trust you with it.
Sure. Well, it depends on, I think Starfighter is going to be kind of a make or break opportunity for Star Wars to kind of reestablish itself as the spectacle that people came to expect from this movie, because Steven Spielberg does spectacles. That's what it is. And so it'll be interesting to see where we go at this point. I think people should go see Disclosure Day. And of course, this is a great year to appreciate cinema.
100%.
The small films, Godzilla -0, like, we have foreign films coming in that are like, also, we have YouTubers that are getting feature film contracts. Like, it really is a great time to be seeing moving pictures, and the excitement for these things as we talk about this man's amazing once in a lifetime career. And I'm so grateful that we got to live alongside it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Is cool to be able to say, yeah, we saw those movies in the theaters. They were all coming. We saw them all, to explain, if my kid ever gets into it, to be like, yeah, we were living through the Spielberg era. We were living through all of these moments that defined cinema after these moments is really cool. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conversation. I hope people share your thoughts with us. Let us know what you think.
Share your thoughts. And patrons, I feel like we should just continue this conversation and talk a little bit more about Disclosure Day specifically. So if you have thoughts, put them in the comments, and we'll talk in the bonus segment momentarily.
I think I want to hear what your guys' favorite Spielberg film is too. Let's do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great idea. All right, next week, are we getting another Armor Party? What's the plan?
We'll I think we should let's get Nick's take. Nick is back from touring. They just got done with a run with Taking Back Sunday. I'm not supposed to know this, but a fall tour is imminent. And then the only reason I know that is because maybe I helped them work on the announcement for it. But most importantly, we have a lot of exciting things now that we're turning the corner to say what is coming next. And some of the interviews in the can already that you guys got are really exciting. So
nice.
Let's see what happens.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you don't know what Armor Party is, it's weird. Maybe you just started listening recently. Mike had a great run. He did about a year or two years, right? Worth of episodes about costuming, whether it's armor or soft parts or any other, props, things like that. It's back and it's part of the Thank the Maker feed. So if you're looking at last week's episode wondering who is this and what am I about to listen to, Mike, tell them really quickly and then let's get out of here.
Yeah, the whole idea of Armor Party is to highlight people who are actually either making Star Wars or they are making waves within the Star Wars fan community. And what's been really cool about since we started this, and obviously Jason jumping on as a host, as someone who has fully jumped in to Star Wars costuming after COVID, some of our friends have had some pretty incredible opportunities, both officially working with Star Wars and also getting some crazy opportunities among pop culture, all because these hobbies started as like an obsession. And what we're trying to do with the show is not only give you a peek into what that's like, but also share that these people are like you and me, like they are super fans of all of this stuff. And when that passion gets put into, persistence and gets put into a project and gets put into the idea of saying, well, where does this go from here? Where do I learn? Where do I keep continuing to find my people? Some pretty amazing things can happen. And those are the stories that we're trying to share on Armor Party. So last week's episode was with Gio Kendall, who was one of the fit and background costume fitters for most of the US productions. And so her knowledge of the weirdest stuff. Jason, your thoughts really quick as the other co-host of Armor Party, but like we're still having conversations with her about stuff. It's amazing. So amazing. Yeah. I mean, just one of those, you sit at the end of either one of the streaming shows or a feature film and you see the thousands of names that go by. And I guarantee you that every single one of them has a super interesting story, but she's one of those folks that has a job that, of course, we knew existed, but I guess never really thought about. She was a key costumer that dealt specifically with background characters. And just such an interesting story. She started with Mando Season 2, went on to Mando Season 3, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and then worked on the latest film, Mandalorian and Grogu. It's about a 2-hour conversation, and she's got some wonderful stories. And what's really nuts, Mike, I know that we were speaking about this, having people reaching out to us and saying, hey, when's part 2? And it's like, we already spoke to her for 2 hours. It's like, there's still so much more to talk about too. So lots of very interesting folks. I'm sure that we'll probably end up mining some of the older interviewees that had been in the first 2 seasons of Armor Party. And as we enter this period where our professional musician friends here are going to be doing lots of festivals and being on tour and being their pro rock star selves, we have to support that with some other programming. So Armor Party now going to be interspersed in between regular Thank the Maker episodes right here on the Thank the Maker feed.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm stoked. I'm beyond stoked. We've all been hammering Mike to reboot this thing for like over a year now. So
totally.
I'm stoked that it's back. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Patrons, will see you momentarily in the bonus segment. And until next week, may the Force be with you. Thank the Maker is produced by Adam Russell and Jason Chiodo and edited by Jason Chiodo. If you enjoy the podcast, you can support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Or you can support us directly at patreon.com/thankthemakerpod, where you can get access to our Discord server, exclusive content, exclusive merch, and more. Our patrons literally make Thank the Maker possible.